Everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, I see people. The whole planet is full of them. Some walk alone, some with a companion, and others go about in groups. Human beings is the name they go by, and they sure love to live huddled together in big, sprawling cities. They all seem very busy doing this and that, and getting on with their lives. Yep, the people of the world tend to look very productive and in charge. If I went and talked to any of them, if I went and interviewed people and asked each of them whether they think they're in charge of their own destinies, I wonder what kind of answers I'd get. Most of them would confidently say, sure, I'm in charge of my own life path. And what about me? Am I really in charge of my own destiny? Do I know where I've come from, why I'm here, and where I'm going? After all, some people would say that just by using this credit card, I'm a virtual serf to powerful men who profit from my existence. Some have said we're all veritable slaves in an invisible penitentiary. If that's the case, then none of us are in charge of our lives. We only think we are, and that's kind of frightening. Maybe that invisible prison does exist. Maybe I can't see it because I've been trained not to be able to see it. Can that situation never change? After all, I sure don't like to think of myself as being on someone else's chain. I think it's time to investigate these matters. When in doubt, find out. That's the key. There are those who've looked into these matters long before my time. What did they have to say? That's what I'd like to know.
So it says here, there's an interesting caption that says, "Here stands the new man. His conception of reality is a dance of electronic images fired into his forebrain, a gossamer construction of his masters designed so that he will not under any circumstances perceive the actual or the real. His happiness is delivered to him through a tube or an electronic connection. His God lurks behind an electronic curtain. And when the curtain is pulled away, we find the CIA sorcerer and the media manipulator." Jim Keith, Mind Control, Mass Control, just one of the fine books on, the manipulation of consciousness that he did before he sadly basically was killed. He was one of the people, I think, one of few who understood that the real war is a war on consciousness. It's very important to always remember that it may have so many other permutations. Now we're seeing it's mass killings in America or what have you. But and then all heads turn. As soon as that comes on the little media framed image, then people are shocked. And they turn to that as if it's some sort of freak phenomena or something like that. It's actually, the sad case is it's not freak. And anyone who's really studied mind control understands that mind control is ubiquitous. It's almost the question of who is not mind controlled, as opposed to who is mind controlled. It's just a difference in degree. The whole question of what is consciousness and how it can be manipulated is one of the most crucial questions of our time. In my work, it really goes along with the whole question of the origins of evil. I mean, it's origins of evil / war on consciousness, and the whole manipulation of man's thinking, his behavior, his biology. And this question has distinguished some of the greatest scholars in the world, people like Wilhelm Reich. But in a more modern context, even people like Alex Constantine, Jim Keith, Jim Marrs to a certain extent has gone into this.
Well, in ancient times they used the sword and they used the gun and they used other methods like religion for pushing the populace around and getting people to do what was wanted. But in recent times, in the 20th century, there are new technologies that provide the expertise to control people totally without their knowledge. Means of electronic entrainment, brain control implants, methods of advertising that manipulate us against our will. And this isn't science fiction. This is something that's very documented. The Manchurian Candidate, of course, was about the creation of a mind-controlled assassin who, as I recollect, it's been years since I've seen the film, was going to be activated to kill the president. Now, this is wild science fiction, crazy impossibility, it just complete nuttiness. But then one takes into consideration the realization that Sirhan, for instance, after he killed Robert F. Kennedy, was examined by several experts, several hypnotherapists, and they came to the conclusion that Sirhan was under hypnotic control when he killed Kennedy. They don't make a big deal out of that on 60 Minutes, but that just happens to be the fact.
There's been others who've theorized, Fritz Springmeier has done some fantastic work on the manipulation of the human brain through technotronic means. What am I saying? It's weaponry, psychic weaponry, radiotronic weaponry that's being used, ELF waves, all sorts of different technologies that are patented. People can go and find out about it, research it, discover it. If you're coming from the world of Ted Gunderson and John DeCamp, we even find out that families who are connected to secret agencies, or maybe who've been communist spies, or who've been part of the Nazi network, who have found homes in America, people who are connected to Operation Paperclip and to the NSA, there's histories of them selling their own children into, mind control experiments. Amazingly, people in the military. This is a documented, known fact. Just unbelievable to think of it, But the most important thing is always to remember that there is this kind of war going on, even though, you may not realize it. And also to realize that there's also the cover-up campaign against mind control. The people who are perpetrating this, who are putting these sleepers out there, who are planning assassinations, who are behind, Sirhan, all the way up through Son of Sam and Mark Hinckley, David Chapman. The list is endless, when you start thinking about it. Jim Jones, this has all been exposed as sort of mind control based cults. But the fact is they don't want the average person realizing this. They don't want, so there's the mind control concept or experimentation, and then there's the smoke screen as well. So you're dealing with two different things here. You're dealing with the fact itself, which is a very interesting study, but then you have all the rebuttal and the general ubiquitous consensus that, oh, no, there's no such thing at all. It's the lone gunman. It's the lone nut, or disgruntled teens, when it comes to Columbine and some of these others, just teens gone out of control. Okay, teens going out of control is one thing. Teens with automatic weapons that you can only find from, government agencies and military camps is another. And you track back and you find out the history of these people being connected to some of these orgs and institutions and military establishments. David Berkowitz has revealed a great deal from prison about that and the elaborate Luciferian satanic networks that work with mind control on all its levels, and tying into the military establishment. This has been thoroughly documented.
In 1993, announced that the entire spree was engineered by a satanic cult, and others had participated in the plot.
Of course, everyone had played a role as far as the chanting and the praying. Everyone had a role in that, and understanding that, this was going to be another sacrifice to our gods. Bunch of scumbags that they were. Our gods, Lucifer and his crew. And we said, yeah, this is going to be another one for you, what I said.
I certainly recommend Maury Terry's Ultimate Evil, in which Berkowitz reveals the whole level of operations, government black ops, and mind control behind the Son of Sam, behind the Son of Sam killings. That ties into people also blowing the whistle like Stanley Kubrick. He making movies, trying to reveal some of this stuff, and then he suddenly mysteriously dies. So there's a lot of. But anyone who's really studied this subject for a long time knows that it's not modern. It doesn't just date from the period of the discovery of America or whatever. You take it back to England, Very strange happenings with serial killers there, like the one that jumps to mind, of course, is Peter Sutcliffe. Some of the revelations he made in court. He was known as the Yorkshire Ripper. You know, I've made a detailed study of so many of these kinds of personalities, both in America and in England, and the same refrain. It's almost unbelievable how common their refrain is. Not just about their own psychological upbringing with their parents and so on, but during their spree of crimes. You know, they made me do it. Voices made me do it. Hey Doc, I'm possessed.
Do it. Do it. You liar.
He's mine!
You got her album to sign, just go. Get in the next taxi and just go. Go, 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 go!
Don't do it.
You liar.
That's not what we're here for. That's not what we're here for.
He signed your record and he was nice. Put the date up and everything, he was kind. But I want to kill him, he's mine. I want him. Help me, devil. Please give me the power. No more.
Let's do it. Have to.
I want to.
No!
God, no. God, no. No.
Nobody! You're nothing!
He wasn't phony. Just get in a taxi.
You coward, you phony!
Taxi and go home. You got your autograph. Go home,
Frame it, put it on the wall. Put it on the wall!
don't listen to them. Don't listen to them.
There's no place like home.
Go home, go home. Mr. Lennon?
They've had this whole run-in with doctors. The Hungerford killing, for instance. The name of the perpetrator escapes me right now, but it's the famous Hungerford case. Is blatant mind control. And the guy having serious problems, committing his crime maybe within half an hour of having a phone call from his specialist. A bizarre phone call was recorded in which the guy lifts the phone, it's perfectly normal, lifts the phone, puts it down, goes upstairs, gets on his hunting attire, his military fatigues, arms himself to the teeth with all of this, hunting attire, and then goes down, into Hungerford and basically slaughters a lot of people. And then, okay, the normal, ubiquitous, he kills himself out of remorse bit at the end. No, he killed himself at the end after the head detective arrives and through a loudspeaker or through some sort of a bullhorn coaxes him out. Johnny, come out, give yourself up, you're surrounded. And then you hear a shot. So how do we know that that particular speech from that detective or that chief of police is not loaded with what they call trigger terms? We know it exists in backward masking. We know that codes have been used in the military. Well, language is a communication device. How do we not know that in that speech, coded, embedded within that particular speech, when they're saying, hey, Johnny, come out, give yourself up, you're surrounded. How do we not know that within that is not some trigger word, and then bang, pop, you hear, oh, and then the media will never know. It's another mystery. Nobody will ever come to and then the media unleash their story for you. They have their little story and the weeping parents, and we had no idea that our son was such a lunatic. No, the whole world now knows that he's a mass murdering psychopath, but you didn't know. So, we got whole questions there that need to be looked at and investigated. Who are the parents of these people? What is all this symbolism about? Are these just, disgruntled people? There's a lot of disgruntled people in the world. There's a lot of frustrated, jaded teens, but a lot of them don't, get into Trans-Ams and drive them through, McDonald's windows. A lot of them don't go and buy automatic weapons and murder innocent people. So people need to wake up and realize this thing is so much deeper. And then the history of it. The history of it goes back through the Assassins, which was the Islamic, during the Crusades. The Crusaders, the Western Crusaders were absolutely stunned, you see, about how it could be that these Saracens and these Islamic warriors were so unbelievably ruthless and just so dedicated, almost had no fear of death. Of course, then they subsequently find out, after they've been in the Middle East a while, that this is a hashish-based cult. These guys are on the bong before they even get on their horses, and other drugs, other kinds of mind-altering drugs, disseminated to them by their occult leaders, people of Islamic versions of Freemasonry. And it's a very elaborate story. In fact, you can pick up this story in, I think it was the book Conspiranoia, but I'm sure that Jim Keith and others have covered this. It's a pretty elaborate story of exactly how the indoctrination process of the Islamic warriors in those days. Basically, it boils down to the fact that they condition you to believe you are an angel, you are serving Allah, and those guys are all the devils, you see, and you killing them is doing great work for Allah and the Prophet. Well, if you're mind controlled into that, you're going to be raging into war and killing and having no problem being very brave and all of that, because you're conditioned to believe that there's no such thing as death, and even after you die, you're going to be surrounded by wonderful, you know, damsels and angelic forms and all of this. So the Templars, later especially the Crusaders, after they had married in with some of these Oriental families and had got picked up a lot of this occult knowledge, started to work it out that, wait a minute, you know, if we could have an army, if we could have agents, if we could have captains and people in our military establishment that had this kind of dedication, you know, we could conquer the world. You see, because remember, England, Britain, you know, is a very small place. Holland, some of the old centers of government are not particularly big. They don't have large populations. They don't have large armies. They can't compete against the great continents of the world. You know, Alexander the Great found that out. So, but wait a minute, if you have one man who's got the power of 10 men because he's been indoctrinated, not only is this chump going to do what you tell him to do, he's also going to be a perfect fighting machine. But it means the removal, does it not, of his normal circuitry of morality. Well, nothing could be easier. Morality, as the philosophers and psychologists have told you, is about paper thin anyway. You only have to say a few choice words to somebody and they've lost their head. So nothing could be simpler. And as these chaps found out, these experimenters, that now we understand is the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, now we understand is the, you know, these Frankfurt School and all of these people of the 20th century. But this thing goes way back through the assassins, through the whole drug cult, of the cult of Dionysus, where the mind-altering, you know, again, harkens back to something I've said repeatedly in my work, is that all those things, all those modalities, all those wonderful spiritual occult practices that have the ability to take your soul up, that have the ability to enlighten you, to inspire you, to sharpen your reason, your critical ability, all those things, every one of them has the equal power in the wrong hands to do the opposite, to take you down. It's the difference between sorcery and magic. Sorcery and magic. Never end talking about this. It's a very, very important concept. And all that you see out there in the world today, especially in the media, and most of even the tinkering around with occult subjects, is a form of sorcery. And I'm not the first to have said that. And that's why there's so much insanity down the line, so much misinterpretation. Because toxic individuals in control of, you know, occult information is wrong. It's going to go askew very easily. Because we have a vast misunderstanding of what all this means. But without even getting into all of that, you know, the Bible, is the Bible sorcery or is the Bible magic? Is it a bit of both? You know, so it goes back through the assassins, it goes back through these, and not only them, there's been many cults in the Orient. The Thuggee is another one to be studying, where we get the word thug. Not only were these people funded and created by British money, by the East India Company, the Thuggees were never a problem before the British secret apparatus got there through the East India Company and wanting to destroy and disempower the native Indians who resisted the infiltration of British elements. They formed a criminal organization, the Thuggee. They funded these, you know, bong-smoking Shiva worshippers or whatever they were, Kali worshippers, who were no threat to anyone, nothing more than a simple faction easily taken care of in the region, suddenly have thousands and thousands of pounds. They're infiltrated by specialists from Britain, from the East India Company, to start plaguing the region, you see, and causing upheaval and disruption, by which the British government hid behind. The triads, you know, the Tong, I mean, the list is endless. So this understanding of allegiance and realizing what a fragile, pathetic creature human beings are anyway, so totally traumatized that it's very easy to just, you know, paint over or even completely erase the human sensibility, the human sensibilities of morality and so on. And it goes right back into the question of religion as well. Religion is very tied up into this, because you're not appealing to man's reason when you're dealing with mind control. That's the first thing. You're dealing to man's irrational self, which is why people like myself are so adamant about developing the reason and developing man's higher, you know, levels of consciousness, because then there's only chance of being immune to all of this. But that's not the agenda of religion. That's not the agenda of the mind controllers. They want to drag you down into an irrational, limbic, mammalian, reptilian, level of consciousness, what the Indian Vedas would call the lower chakra drives, and keep you there permanently so that you're confused and terribly weak, terribly psychologically disempowered. And so therefore you're going to seek stability, you're going to seek security through whatever kinds of handrails that are then provided for you by the system. Again, the other side of this is you have the problem and you have the historical issue, historical problem, but you also have a new age now in which we have the internet, we have these writers, authors, so we're catching up on the game. We have even movies on the subject, incredibly detailed movies, in fact. That, we're catching up on the game. We have even movies on the subject, incredibly detailed movies, in fact, that, look into the whole of this.
They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of snakes is under their lips. Their mouths are full of bitterness and curses. And in their paths, nothing but ruin and misery. And the fear of God is not before their eyes. They have taken the hearts and minds of our leaders. They have recruited the rich and the powerful. And they have blinded us to the truth. Our human spirit is corrupted. Why do we worship greed? Because outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners. They have us. They control us. They are our masters. Wake up. They're all about you, all around you.
Easy to apply nails, pre-colored in 7 luscious hues. Just...
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep.
Oh, goddamn hacker, that second damn night that asshole's cut in.
The movement was begun 8 months ago by a small group of scientists who discovered, quite by accident, these signals being sent through...
He's giving me a headache. Yeah, tell me about it. Us took the hackers months to figure out how to do this.
The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
All I would say is that we've got to not trust the media stories when any of these, atrocities take place. You've got to really search out and seek out for yourself and not believe what, the mainstream media is telling you. You have to realize that this is a very ancient thing. It's very sophisticated. And that you'll have to realize that religion plays a key part because it deals with the emotions of man, his irrational drives, and his needs. Man being raped on one side of what he really is spiritually, loss of center. So when you see these Sirhans, you see in these Hinckleys and these apparently lost souls, who are easily manipulated, you got to realize that that is the guy next door. This is pretty much walking around in the world. But the good thing about the modern age is that you have people like Ted Gunderson and John DeCamp, you see, and whistleblowers from within. Ted Gunderson, of course, was very senior in the FBI. John DeCamp was a senator. You have people from within the system now. You have, I can't remember his name, but in MASH, the show MASH, BJ Honeycutt, the guy, his name will come to me in a minute. He has made a personal investigation into child abuse and satanic circles. So you have famous actors, Lee Majors and Robert Mitchum have done movies on this. Certain Albert Finney with Looker. There's a lot of movies out there that have been covering this. Of course, The Manchurian Candidate immediately jumps to mind, with a fantastic film with who was in that? It was Frank Sinatra. Lots of elements there, and that is not fiction. That is absolutely true, with key words, key phrases. Isn't it a coincidence that Mark Hinckley and Chapman, both were reading Catcher in the Rye? So just even these small sort of anecdotal connections. And the way they do it is also very interesting. How the whole process of how an actual mind control slave is made runs along pretty typical lines. They have traditional ways of doing it. It's very much based on your own profile when they've been studying you independently without your knowledge. And also, of course, we find out that many of these individuals who've gone down that road, who've been so abused this way, were in fact involved with the corps, or the the United Nations, or the media, the military. You cannot even document the cases of the people who've gone on to commit these crimes, including Oswald and Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, and other people. They've all had some sort of background in the military, or they've all worked for some sort of United Nations group, or military corps, or Peace Corps, or whatever. They've had some tie-in with some major orgs, and sometimes a lot more, sometimes full-blown, military intelligence kinds of organizations. And we even know that the conspiracy movement and the New Age movement is infiltrated by these people. There's all sorts of levels on this, all the way from the spiritual level, with religion affecting your mind and disempowering you in order to control every action and every thought you think, all the way down to this more street level, mind control, where kids are recruited from school because teachers who are in the pay of these think tanks observe the child, observe their spiritual tendencies, observe their introverted nature. Because you'll always hear the same refrain. It's a very, very common refrain, which you pick up in Mark Hinckley, because he specifically was a virtuous man, actually. And his crimes were born out of a virtue that was manipulated. His virtue was to save the young from all the pestilence and evil that he saw that was rampant in the adult world. So the mind controllers would have picked up on this. And they would have looked at his profile and say, this man is, kind of humanitarian. He's a bit of a loner. So he was a kind of a loner in school. Yet, as a loner, he joined the military. Why would a loner... See, there's a contradiction right there, and they pick up on that. Why would a loner be joining something which is not only collectivized, it's highly collectivized, it's very regimented? So then they pick up conflict in his personality. And then he joins a collectivized kind of setup, like the military, and then is still super introverted. His buddies will say, oh, we didn't go on with him, he never spoke, he was dead quiet. So you've got little contradictions there. Why would a man even like that be compelled to join something totally antithetical to his nature? Was he compelled to do that? Or was he trying to break out of his own personality mold and try to do that as a way to heal himself from what he thought was a malignancy of nature? Because if you're introverted and live in the West or live in America, they'll make you feel that you're malignant, all right. It's not that introversion is malignant, quite the contrary. As the psychologists know, it's the extrovert personality type that's the easiest hypnotized. Ha ha ha. The extrovert personality, Mr. Sunshine, the one season world, go getting gung-ho guy who's super successful, got everything that the material world can offer. He goes under in 2 seconds flat, but it's the introvert that you kind of, manipulate. Well, so this is the, again, contradictions.
Who wants it? Congratulations, Richard. You had some very interesting scores on the first series of tests for Parallax.
Testing for what?
The Parallax Corporation. You did apply for our training, didn't you?
Oh, Christ, that.
As you know, Parallax receives demands from all phases of industry. Demands for unusual personnel. If you qualify, and we think that you can, we're prepared to offer you the most lucrative and rewarding work of your life.
Yeah, what do you get out of it?
We receive a sort of finder's fee. As I said, the jobs are difficult to fill.
Your tests suggest that you have remarkable talents.
Yeah, what do you mean by talents?
You have difficulty holding on to a job, don't you? I don't know, I just don't like to take a lot of shit so people say I got antisocial tendencies.
Right. Now tell me, has it ever crossed your mind that maybe it's everybody else's problem that they don't get along with you?
Why?
Because you see, the very quality that gets you in trouble is what makes you potentially invaluable.
What's that?
Your aggressiveness.
Aggressiveness.
I don't want to intrude on you while you're reading. But get in touch with me personally if you'd like to go further.
But man is herded like an animal because that's another easy way to control his actions. And it just makes it a whole lot more difficult for the spiritual individual to stand alone, you know, the whole concept of the outsider. And can the outsider even take that type of ostracization and feeling of alienation? Or can he learn to live with it as a necessary evil? And try to find a center in some way? But symbolism is used a lot. Not only words and trigger words, but certain kinds of symbolism will be used. And I believe that these people, even when they approach priests, you know, maybe if they have some mental problems, what's your options? You know, nobody's gonna understand you and your family are around you, so you're bound to have to go to a priest or some sort of psychologist, psychiatrist. And in my mind, you know, that's really could be potentially very dangerous. Because I've got questions about who these people work for, you know, and what kind of allegiances they have, and how many strange deaths have taken place while you're in the custody of these men in white.
Why is Bayer Corporation the rat of the week?
Internal documents show that after this company positively, absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factor 8. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an incurable disease.
Hold on, Mike. So hold on. So you're telling me that Bayer knew that this drug was infected with the AIDS virus. They yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas?
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit. They dropped the product in Japan, Spain, and France.
Each year in the U.S., thousands of women learn they have cervical cancer. I could be one less.
One less statistic. One less.
Because now there's Gardasil, the only vaccine that may help protect you from the 4 types of human papillomavirus that may cause 70% of cervical cancer.
I want to be one less woman who will battle cervical cancer. One less.
Like all vaccines, Gardasil may not fully protect everyone. The side effects include pain, swelling, itching and redness at the injection site, fever, nausea, or dizziness.
Gardasil is not for women who are pregnant.
Gardasil does not prevent all types of cervical cancer, so it is important to continue with routine cervical cancer screening.
Gardasil will not treat cervical cancer.
Ask your doctor about getting vaccinated with the only cervical cancer vaccine, Gardasil.
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 With Gardasil, you could be one less.
O-A-E-L-E-S-S. I want to be one less. One less. O-A-E-L-E-S-S.
Collapsed after being given the cervical cancer vaccine Gardasil. Health authorities are urging parents to stay calm, insisting the drug, which is being offered to students in WA, is safe.
Brooke Levi thought the Gardasil shot she had on Friday at Engadine High was going to protect her. But now she blames the cervical cancer vaccine for a bad reaction.
I want to pass out and just throw up and just go to sleep.
Brooke ended up at Sutherland Hospital. 2 weeks ago, Melbourne student Natasha D'Souza also felt unwell after being vaccinated.
I actually wasn't looking too good and I was looking a bit green in the face. And then I just basically collapsed about 5 minutes into class.
Natasha says her arms and legs were paralysed and she couldn't speak. She wasn't the only girl to have the jab, then fall sick.
Yeah, there were girls dropping like flies, basically.
Medical authorities have declared the reactions aren't linked to Gardasil. They've blamed fear of needles.
The after effects are very, very rarely serious, and the benefits of the vaccination are very, very important.
There's no reason to stop the vaccination program. The vaccines have been thoroughly tested both in Australia and overseas and have been found to be extraordinarily safe.
70,000 Gardasil vaccinations have been administered since the drug's approval last year. Full protection against the virus that causes cervical cancer requires follow-up shots, but many girls aren't keen to chance it.
I don't want to after going through this.
Damien Smith, 7 News.
Coming up in 7 News, a warning to diabetics about the deadly side effects of a popular medication.
All of the money from the health industry goes into the medical monopoly and the drug trust. Interestingly enough, the Rockefellers control every major drug company in the world, and now when I say control, I mean directly. They have, among the directors and officials of each of the 18 largest drug companies in the world, they have men from Chase Manhattan Bank, from the Exxon oil company, and so forth. So they're right there, the names, I have all their names in my book, Murder by Injection.
So it's a terrible problem, terrible problem, and if people are not willing to go holistic and really have a holistic background, you could be jumping from the frying pan into the fire when you try to approach so quote-unquote professionals that give you help. Well, you might be going to the most psychotic people that ever lived, the very people who have caused you to be the way you are through their whole media manipulation and their whole infrastructure of society. Like, that goes back to the question of who is sane, what is sanity? Is there anybody sane in this world? You know, the more you start to look at it, the more you start to realize, no, you're not. You're in some sort of hideous Planet of the Apes type experiment here. And man is a terribly, terribly disassociated and fragmented individual.
People come to me all the time asking me to medicate them. The implication behind that was that human beings, like all other animals, have a particular ideal model. It had a machine-like quality to it. We know what the model should be, and they ask the medications, they ask of me to give them medications that would push them back to this particular model they have, an unrealistic model, but a very static model of man as machine.
What was happening was that large parts of normal human experience, grief, disappointment, loneliness, were all being reclassified as medical disorders. In the process, a new system of management was emerging. The drugs took away those complex and difficult feelings and made the individuals happier. But they also made them simpler beings, more easy to predict and manage, and closer to the machine-like creatures at the heart of the economic models.
By using checklists of symptoms about emotions, you have gone out and confused normal human responses to life with mental disorder, and therefore created an illusion of a vast epidemic, a medicalized illusion. And obviously a situation where you medicalize is a situation where your focus will not be on social change, it will be on controlling individuals to fit in properly. That's the subtle and overall danger here, that it could serve our kind of social economic systems needs in a way in which we become more efficient but less human.
I will never veer away from this whole concept of consciousness, the effects on consciousness. So it's really refreshing for me to read people like Jim Keith, and also even Alex Constantine to a certain degree, where he talked about his book Covert War Against Rock, amongst many others, is fantastic. Because there's all sorts of little sections of this mind control game. There's the cult of Dionysus, which is a very ancient cult that has specifically dealt with the concepts of the Solar King, involving a lot of alchemy, alchemical principles. Again, not as people would mostly understand that kind of study, but as I said, any study that is meant to be the uplift of your soul can also be used to drag you right down into a completely anti-human place. And the alchemical message of the 12 steps of the Sun King, like Hercules went through the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 trials, and Horus going through the 12 hours of night and the 12 hours of day. Well, you see, they also throw up people's champions who manifest these archetypes, because mythology is full of archetypes, and these mind manipulators and these people who are very familiar with the truth about mythology are able to manipulate stereotypical people, either people in their own bloodline who are then later put before you as, oh, it's just the person next door, you know, the Durans you see in The Cure, and, you know, Jim Morrison and all these people, and you don't know who, in fact, these people really are. Well, I got questions about a lot of these people in bands through their names, through the symbolism that they use. I mean, people are only going to go and pick up, you know, albums of the Lords of the New Church, you see, and, you know, certain bands, certain even personalities within the movie business. Oh, we accept you've got geniuses. We accept you've got, you know, phenomenal minds on the artistic level, the Werner Herzogs, the Alfred Hitchcock. You know, we have no problem accepting that you've got exceptional minds of genius, but we can't understand that you have dark minds of genius in the same boat as well. Hell, man hasn't even got around to understanding that enemies in the world are created in exactly the way that allies are created. If a country approaches another country, or a government approaches another country government and says, we want to be allies, and then they shake hands and they have agreements, you've just created an ally. Well, then what is so unbelievably difficult for people to understand that the same action, similar action, causes political enemies to exist? You create your enemies. In fact, you might even have your own men in there, you know, running the government in order to make these enemies. This is how this dialectic works. Now, in the field of pop music and rock and all of these things, you know, I don't approach it from a Christian point of view, so I'm not going to sort of, you know, hammer these people just because they've seen wearing a pentagram one day, or, you know, they dress in black or something nonsensical, like a lot of the Christians, you know, who try their best to critique this stuff. Unfortunately, they get like way off, you know, in my opinion, and basically it comes into hammering their own theories, you know. You're going to have to be very impartial when you investigate occult matters. You know, Christianity is an occult agenda which has been used by the mind controllers endlessly. You know, wasn't it Mark Hinckley or David Chapman was involved in some Christian network? You know, I know he looked after children. He spent a lot of his time working in children's homes, in daycare and things like that. So these are virtuous Christian, soulful people who are not able to adjust to their society, and then were picked up or experimented on, or just asked to even do a simple questionnaire, just like the old Scientology gig. Well, we're doing a poll, we're doing a research, we're doing a survey. You know, we got the 7-page, you know, obligatory document we give out. You know, you don't know where that document is going. You don't know where that is going to end up, or who's going to be studying it and going, interesting, interesting. Then they file them away and use them whenever they need it. This is exactly how it happens. You have to be very careful with all of this. Who knows where that gigantic Scientology, you know, join-up sort of questionnaire thing is really going, and what computer is reading it to find out exactly who you are and whether you fit one of their mind control, you know, exactly who you are and whether you fit one of their mind control, you know, schema or not. And you know, by the time you find out, it's too late. But these individuals often, who are exceptionally gifted, can also be used, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And they are put before you, they're stereotypes, but they represent powerful archetypes. One of them being the Sun King, the Solar King, like Elvis Presley. And in fact, it's absolutely uncanny in the last concerts that Elvis did, where he almost verbally is talking in terms of solar symbolism. If you can decode what he was saying on stage at some of the last concerts that he did, it's absolutely remarkable how much solar symbolism he's using, unbeknownst to himself, which is again how the archetype works through the stereotype. And one of the key things is that when the Solar King is about to die or end his cycle, some of the mythologies, not all of them, but some traditions claim that the sun must die in water, in some kind of plunge bath or in some kind of lake. And if you open some very early, you know, pictures of alchemy that are woodcuts, you can find these online, you will literally see that. You will see the king in his old age immersed in water. And where have we seen that before? You know, Jim Morrison perhaps, Brian Jones. You know, there's a whole, even the concept of dying on your own vomit or dying in alcohol, you see in your lungs, is a water-based ritual type of thing going on here. So in the case of so many of these people, we need to look into some of the ritual elements of what was going on.
Of course, the Mafia had their hooks into the music business going back to the jukebox wars. And then in World War II, the OSS started up a program called Operation Underworld, which entailed the actual recruitment of key Mafia figures to operate in Italy and the United States, right? And after World War II, they continued this brotherhood between the CIA and the Mafia,
that continues to the present day. Now, under Operation Chaos, I mentioned that all intelligence agencies have been brought into the umbrella program. Well, the Mafia was brought into it too because they were central to the music business itself, and they could be used to control and ultimately, in some cases, murder musicians who are outspoken in their opposition to the U.S. government. Jimi Hendrix was killed for two reasons. First of all, he had made statements in the teen press calling for the Black Panthers to go to Washington, D.C. and shoot the place up. Secondly, he had done a benefit for Bobby Seale and the Chicago 8. And that got the attention of the FBI and a program called COINTELPRO, which was a surveillance and assassination program. And it led to the murder of 28 Black Panthers. Tupac Shakur makes 29 because he was a Black Panther. Hendrix linked up with the Black Panthers, and for that reason, he was a dead man.
But the Jim Jones thing has been blown wide open. If people know how to, read, they can go to Colonel James Bogart's book, Call to Serve, which is a fantastic book. It actually deals very deeply with the truth behind the Kennedy assassination. And there's other books that detail the truth about the Jim Jones thing and show that it was a British crack unit, not the SAS, but the Black Panthers or the Black something or other, happened to just be on maneuvers, right, in Guyana, within a mile from where the assassinations are meant to have taken place, the so-called suicide. If anybody believes that, I mean, they need their head examined, but, it just turns out that when you really do the research, you find that some crack secret operational, crack squad of British troopers are on location in Guyana at that time, and it vanished as mysteriously as they came, and the investigation never covered their presence. So all the way across the quasi-understanding of religion and cultism. I think we were talking earlier about how you said the cults were studied by the marketing men, the media, straight commercialistic people to see about allegiances so they could start, infiltrating their own commercials for stupid cars and stuff like that with this cultish sense of this imagery, to engender belonging, in the sense of belonging, all that tribal stuff again.
When I was a brand manager at Procter & Gamble, my job was basically to make sure the product was good, develop new advertising copy, design the pack. Now a brand manager has an entirely different kind of responsibility. In fact, they have more responsibility. Their job now is to create and maintain a whole meaning system for people, through which they get identity and understanding of the world. Their job now is to be a community leader.
It is the big monopolistic.
Ad strategist Douglas Atkin, an expert on the relationship between consumers and brands, says he had a eureka moment one night during a focus group.
I was in a research facility watching 8 people rhapsodize about a sneaker. And I thought, where is this coming from? This is, at the end of the day, a piece of footwear. But the terms they were using were evangelical. So I thought, if these people are expressing cult-like devotion, then why not study cults? Why not study the original? Find out why people join cults and apply that knowledge to brands.
I'm loyal to this practice because it's done so much for me.
If Atkin could find what pushed a person from mere fan to devoted disciple, perhaps he could market that knowledge.
Most of the people I discuss the WWF with know that it's not a sport. Right. It's a masculine ballet.
So he compared dozens of groups he considered cults with so-called cult brands, from Hare Krishna to Harley Davidson.
If you're smart and kind of individual, that's what you drive.
From Falun Gong to Mac.
I think there's something about Mac users, like they get it.
We just had discovered something. They realize there are other people like them and they cooperate on certain projects, and it's part of belonging to the tribe.
And the conclusion was this, is that people, whether they're joining a cult or joining a brand, do so for exactly the same reasons. They need to belong and they want to make meaning. We need to figure out what the world is all about, and we need the company of others. It's simply that. Saturn is a really good example. It's a mass cult brand. For example, 45,000 people turned up to spend their holiday, their vacation time at the factory in Tennessee, instead of going to Disney World or the Grand Canyon. Now, why would they do that? It's because they wanted to meet other people who own Saturns, They wanted to meet the rest of the Saturn family. They wanted to meet the people who made the car. The people who made the car wanted to meet them. And the people who ran the Saturn business knew that.
This summer,
They not only knew it, they turned it into an ad, which only brought more people into the Saturn family.
we called it the Saturn Homecoming. They could see where the idea for a new kind of car company had taken shape, and we could thank them for believing we could do it.
And they created a great meaning system for Saturn. In those fantastic commercials, their meaning system was based on old-time values of community. It was a kind of an icon that America yearned for but couldn't find anymore.
And that's the object of emotional branding, to fill the empty places where non-commercial institutions like schools and churches might have once done the job. Brands become more than just a mark of quality. They become an invitation to a longed-for lifestyle, a ready-made identity.
So as long as man has not got a center, as long as he's, divorced from his own center, not aware about how his consciousness is being manipulated, he will remain open to this kind of manipulation. Fantastic comment on this in Lord of the Rings. They didn't bring it out in the movie, except in one very short line, which is hard to miss, but in the book they emphasize it very, very prominently, that when they approaching the wizard Saruman, who's a character in the story who's basically was a good man turned evil, that the other wizards in the know, or the other elders in the know, continually warn anyone who should approach Saruman to beware his voice.
The white wizard approaches.
To beware his use of language, because that alone will hypnotize you, and no matter how strong you are, you'll be pulled into his web.
Do not let him speak. He will put a spell on us.
I just loved that. I thought that was fantastic, a very powerful image. They did bring it out a little bit in the movie, but this whole idea of the seduction of a man's voice and the power of charisma, and the ability, and of course the media uses this a great deal. And you have, this ties back into the whole concept of the god Mercury. If anyone's familiar with the symbolism of Hermes and Mercury and Thoth, and the earlier version of all of these gods was Ogma from the Celtic tradition, and even Hern being the origin of the word Herm or Hermes. It's all Irish Druidic. Those gods were the gods of language. Those gods were the gods of words. Those gods were the gods of communication, with the understanding that communication by words is a phenomenally powerful and important weapon of both the good and the bad side. Interestingly, Ogma, the Celtic god, his other two traits was strength. They taught symbolically like this. Okay, so Ogma is the god of language, but he's also the god of strength? Yes, because language is strength. Language is a form of power. Man who knows how to manipulate language and words is strong. What was his title, his name? They call him the honey mouth. Ogma the honey mouth, because, and I guess there's even Scandinavian, I think Loki had the power of that, almost a hypnotic, ability with words.
Art is like magic, the science of manipulating symbols, words or images, to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. A grimoire, for example, the Book of Spells, is simply a fancy way of saying grammar. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you are likely to see to a shaman.
When you hear these talismanic words like control, security, stronger America, strength, realize that they're talismanic words. They're being used against you. They're seduction words to try and get you to accept this because you don't have that. Well, you've been raped of that. The people who are selling you one story here have actually taken away the very things that you needed that were in your psyche to begin with.
I am continuing and I am increasing the search for every possible path to peace.
We maintain our strength in order to deter and defend against aggression, to preserve freedom and peace.
No one
friend or foe, should doubt our desire for peace.
The United States wants peace.
We seek peace. We strive for peace.
I pledged in my campaign for the presidency to end the war in a way that we could win the peace. I respect your idealism. I share your concern for peace. I want peace as much as you do.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud. Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Botulinum, VX, sarin, nerve agent.
Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
Terrorism, cyber attacks,
Nuclear program.
biological weapons,
cruise missiles, ballistic missiles.
Chemical and biological weapons.
Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
President Bush has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Tony Blair has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Donald Rumsfeld has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Richard Butler has said they do. The United Nations has said they do. The experts have said they do. Iraq says they don't. You can choose who you want to believe.
The sources that have deceived us so constantly don't deserve our trust. And to the extent that we give them our trust, we set ourselves up to be scammed again and again.
There are reports that there is no evidence of a direct link between Baghdad and some of these terrorist organizations.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there's some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
I will build new partnerships to defeat the threats of the 21st century. Terrorism and nuclear proliferation, poverty and genocide, climate change and disease. And I will restore our moral standing so that America is once again that last best hope for all who are called to the cause of freedom, who long for lives of peace, and who yearn for a better future.
And this is used endlessly in the media by the drip feed method of just constantly downloading the same idiotic memes that you consciously would think you resist. But if they're repeated for the 10, 20 years and you've been growing up, before you know it, you're a parrot of all of that. You don't even realize it was implanted. That's the whole point. You're not meant to realize that your thinking is not your own. That's the smokescreen I was talking about. You're not meant to know that you're under hypnotism. You're meant to think you're perfectly normal. So they're going to sell you the most irrational, most satanic, most vile, pornographic lies, but they're going to sell it in a capsule that makes you think that you're perfectly spiritual, perfectly adjusted, totally normal. As this continues, as this process continues, the division between the outsider who's really sane and the unsane gets wider and wider and wider. What are people complaining about? That they can't believe the world they're walking around in. Sane people are going, I can't handle it, I can't work, it's terrible, the people are idiots. Yeah, but that didn't happen last year, that didn't happen 2 months from, that didn't happen, 2 months ago. You are seeing the symptom, not the cause. You're seeing the symptom of an immensely long, phenomenally detailed and interesting and complex. What was Soviet Russia? You can sum up the whole gig. Experiment. Social experimentation. Meaning you split hairs as to whether it was a Darwinian experimentation or an Orwellian Darwin, blah, blah, blah. It's an experiment in how to control human beings who very easily were controlled. Oh my goodness, 33 people are shot dead. Everybody is just tripping over themselves with awe and amazement and anger and frustration. Let me see, what else is going on in the world right now? What else has been going on since 2001? Let me see, what's happening in Iraq or Iran right now? Can we ask a question about that? What was going on during the previous George Bush? Was there a thing called Desert Storm in which millions of people were killed, children were wiped out, incinerated? in Panama were people not burned to death with lasers and incinerated in their own cars, completely innocent people. Then we have Grenada before that. Grenada. There you have, where do we stop? How many wars do we need? But your children die. Of course it's horrible. But can we have some context here? Can we have some sanity here? That just because your little pathetic, mediocre lifestyle has now been shaken up by something you don't understand, that's the only violence you think it exists in this world? Somebody has to be wielding, a 38 on your own street, in your own backyard, before you realize that there's such a thing as violence in the world? I'm here to tell you that all of that kind of violence, including the genocide, including the mega death, chew on this, that all of that, all through history, is a tiny aspect of the violence that exists in the world. That's the stuff you can see with your 5 senses. But as any competent psychologist will tell you, that is a very small, sadly, that is a symptom. That's what that is. That's an outpouring and outletting, a playing out in the world. Obviously helped and assisted by those who would like to have chaos rule in the world, yes. But where is its roots? You're going to keep studying the, leaf? You're going to keep studying the bloom and not ask where the root is? Or we'll have a wonderful society tomorrow where they'll be able to prune that really easily. And we won't have any of that violence because, in fact, we'll have a new world order. The chaos out of control. Everything's in chaos. People killing themselves. And we have a perfect structure now that will always deal with that. But will the root be ever looked at? If the root is not looked at, I don't care what kind of order or system is involved in the world of man that, prunes that or, keeps that nicely culled or caged or whatever. I happen to know that the root is twofold. The root of all of this mayhem, chaos, and destruction and immorality is actually a twofold root. The one root is in man's inability to look at his dark emotions, which is a psychological look at this.
What are you looking at? Huh?
And the other root is in the fact that there is an agency working in the world to engender that. Now, luckily in the conspiracy movement today, what's jokingly called the conspiracy movement, or I prefer to call it the alternative research community, we have now authors and people from all walks of life who are investigating that fact, that second root. That we think that this is not by chance. We don't really think that man is that immoral. We don't really think that man of his own nature will run around, you know, fighting wars and building napalm bombs and all that. You know, so maybe there's something else going on. Finally, the human race is waking up to the fact that yes, that's right. You know, somebody has kick-started this and maintains it through the perpetuation of people's false allegiances and all the rest of it. And I'm very happy and glad to see that taking place, this removing of the lid, which is astrologically connected to Pluto, the planet Pluto, or the archetype Pluto, or the New Age. The real truth about the New Age is that the revelations that arise because man gets sharper in his critical ability and starts to look beneath the surface of reality. That's great. What I'd really like to see, though, and what I'm hoping to very much help pioneer in this era, is more attention on the first root as well, which is that human beings need to examine their own private consciousness to understand some of the dynamics of the full psyche, not just the ego and not just the programmed brain self, because the brain is a machine programmed by the world. But then you also come in with a thing called the mind, which has been programmed over millennia or generations. People need to know about the tripartite division or schemata of the ego, of the brain, of consciousness, from the Freudian point of view. They should also find out about the quaternity schemata of Jung. It was a little bit similar to Freud, but a little bit different. These people have, understood the dynamics, the anatomy of something that you can't see, consciousness. People know about the body. You got 2 arms, you got 2 legs, you got 1 head. Okay, well then what is the anatomy of your consciousness? Anybody ever thought about that? Well, yes, somebody did. It's called Sigmund Freud. People need to pick up his books, get on the web and find out what is the anatomy of your consciousness. What is thinking? How do you think? What is thinking? How does that happen? What is thought? Who's thinking about thought? Because if you don't ask these questions, you're not going to have too much of an understanding of what might be spirit or all of that. You're looking for the spiritual, but if you don't know what you are, how can you ever find out the other? So the real journey now begins. All of these traumas and tragedies are in a way a catalyst. Sad but true that man has to learn through tragedy, but then, hey, wait a minute, even the Greeks knew that as far back as you go, if man is left without tragedy, he'll just sit on his ass and do nothing all day long. He will sun himself and he will take care of his narcissistic, personal, sensationalistic needs, and nothing of any other thing will cross his mind ever. So unfortunately, the universe, nature, whatever you want to call it, fate, has to sort of deliver man what we would call tragedy, and therefore it wakes him up. It's a catalyst to him looking at deeper things. This is very, very necessary. And one of those areas now is that he needs to really continue the investigation of his own thinking, his own consciousness, and realize that the secrets, that's where the secrets lie.
One thing is sure, a great change of our psychological attitude is imminent. That is certain.
Why?
Because we need more. We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger. And we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.
And never forgetting also that there is this other unseen hand that knows absolutely what consciousness is. who are experts in that fact. You're walking around couldn't care less. You're waiting for the next movie to come out and the next fashion and all that, what Hollywood's going to do next. But there's people there who have a thorough understanding of human consciousness, human psyche, human libido, and they're working on it 24/7 to feather their own nests and also to keep man in servitude, man whom they think is their creation. They think of man as just being one of their own, like somebody treats a pet. If you actually watch how people mostly treat their pets, when you really watch it, you'll find that the pet is a slave. Well, we have people ruling this society who think of human beings as pets and slaves. Yeah, they provide you with some food and they take you for a walk now and again, but they basically you are a pet and you'll be told where to sit and where to go and what to do. That should be obvious to people by now. But these individuals don't really have any fear of us. Well, they do have fear of us to the extent that they know if we were awakened what we could do.
I'm deeply troubled that a very vague, emotionally stated, semi-theologically defined diagnosis of the central global menace is obscuring our national ability to comprehend the historically unprecedented challenge which is being posed in our time by a massive global political awakening, and thus is obstructing our ability to deal effectively with the global political turmoil that this awakening is generating.
So their motive of why they would want to dumb down people is also highly practical. Remember, these people are very, very practical. They may be evil, but they're also very practical. They know that you don't want a massive, intelligent, free-thinking, self-aware, proactive, deeply concerned, spiritually empowered people. That's the worst threat that they can imagine. So it's very practical for them to keep people, what do they call it? One leash for one neck. Everybody in a complete sense of consent, with the illusion that they're independent. It doesn't work without that.
It looks like a unanimous majority. Exactly, that's what's worrying me. Very bad for morale. Some of these good people don't seem to appreciate the value of free elections. They think it's a game.
Everyone votes for a dictator.
Not at all. It's just that their resistance is low. Frankly, my dear fellow, you are just the sort of candidate we need.
There's recently a lack of opposition in the matter of free elections. This is not good for our community and reflects an acceptance of things as they are. We know what we must do. What must we do? Exactly. We are, however, fortunate in having with us a recent recruit whose outlook is particularly militant and individualistic. Let us hope that he will not deny his duty to the community by refusing to take up the challenge. Good people, it is my pleasure to present to you the one and only number 6.
I am not a number. I am a person. In some place, at some time, all of you held positions of a secret nature and had knowledge that was invaluable to an enemy. Like me, you are here to have that knowledge protected or extracted.
That's the stuff to give them.
Unlike me, many of you have accepted the situation of your imprisonment and will die here like rotten cabbages.
Keep going, they'll love it.
The rest of you have gone over to the side of our keepers. Which is which? How many of each? Who's standing beside you now? I intend to discover who are the prisoners and who the warders. I shall be running for office in this election.
Good people, let us applaud a citizen of character. May the better man win, and a big hand for number 6. seeing you.
You must absolutely have the illusion of independence and self-determination. And we have a problem then. We have a problem that to really, really be independent, to really be an individual, which in psychological terms is called individuation, that's difficult for most people. It's kind of tough. It requires work. It requires, to think and act in moral ways, and that's just too much trouble. I wish there was a halfway, stage. So the media goes, well, there is. We'll sell you the fashion of independence. You can buy into this. You can be a goth, a punk, you can be straight, you can be gay, you can be macho. We'll sell you all sorts of images to decorate your inauthentic life. And that will pacify you because there is a voice that's kind of screaming inside of you that you're not living an authentic life. We know that. We know that's a tough voice to live with. But you also can't really do anything about it because, you're lazy and you're weak. And you realize what you would have to sacrifice or lose if you really took the true moral way. The way of selfhood and the way of finding out who and what you are. We know that's difficult for you. So what we'll do is we'll manifest a bunch of simulacras. We have a whole industry creating false personas. But if you buy into that, and it's very easy to do that, it's just a matter of going down to the hairdresser and coloring your hair pink and wearing a couple of earrings and getting a few tattoos and, having a big t-shirt with anarchy written on it. But you're the last person who even understands what true freedom and anarchy is. But don't worry about that. Well, the world is full of those kinds of people, isn't it? But do you see it as being any more free? If that was ever going to solve the world's problems, what happened in the 1960s when everybody was free, quote unquote? Where's the love now? Did it stop wars? Did it stop evil men ruling the world? Did it stop genocide? Did it stop the mutilation of animals and abattoirs? Tell me what one thing that the hippie movement or the punk movement of the 1970s achieved. Well, I'll tell you what they achieved. The leaders of the punk movement are living like pashas and maharajas in million-dollar houses over there in Bel Air and also in Los Angeles. Billy Idol has a fleet of Harley Davidsons. That's what happened. That's what happened. But they're wearing a hammer and sickle. We're for the people, peace and love, CND, all that shit. Utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Maybe the man from within who's completely incognito, who's working within the system, suit and tie, you'd pass them by on the street. Maybe those people will do more damage to the evil status quo than all those hordes screaming for reform, Because it's not just a mass of people label reading, running away into these inauthentic models. It's a small group of educated people, dedicated, passionate, absolutely zero tolerance for the lie, who are from all walks of life, who have spiritually, most importantly, that they are spiritually adept, that they understand what knowledge is. They have reverence for knowledge. They're not just trying to gain knowledge. Any idiot can do that. Gaining knowledge, well, God, the schools are full of it. No. It's a matter of loving knowledge. That's a big difference. Loving knowledge, understanding what knowledge is a whole different thing than gaining knowledge. So there's these fine lines in all of this, very fine lines. And if the knowledge has to be empowering and changing you first, how can you do anything to change another world? Or maybe you don't even have the right. Maybe we're on the complete wrong subject matter altogether. How does anyone even think that they have a right to involve themselves in the life or the lifestyle of anyone else? If you really think about that, you'll find it's pretty preposterous. But at the same time, you do have the right to fix your own life. That, at least we know, is an absolute. You have the absolute right to work on your life. You have the right to make any of the choices that you want to make. So then my work sort of really focuses on that and doesn't stray from that. If it is true that the Illuminati, the child molesting priests, the Templars, and all of these people, what would we think if it is proven or found out that each and every one of these people has the perfect right to do what they are doing? And that you, in fact, have really no right to tell them or anyone else what to do? What happens if that turns out to be the spiritual law? And that the only thing that you have the right to do is to change your own life, regardless of what anybody else is doing. Well, then we have a problem, because the whole world is running around doing exactly the opposite. Everyone's running around fixing all of these other people and waving placards and getting reforms and getting to change this and do that, or we'll lock you up. And society will go through these cycles in which you have a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, a little bit of dark, a little bit of light. And yet the real work is about you taking care of your own house, your own garden. And if everybody did that, you know, unseen forces would come to aid. Man would, like Vernon Howard said, we can accept that God can become man to save man, but we can't accept that man can become God to save himself. It's one of the most powerful statements I've ever heard. And so what is that dependency in human beings that makes them refute that? We know that everyone listening to the sound of is going to refute that. No, it's Jesus who's meant to do it. Muhammad, Allah, what are you talking? Oh, that's all that humanist stuff. Man being his own God. Oh, satanic evil. So we already know that, you know, that's not a common held theory. But wait a minute. What then is the motive that makes people refute that statement? Before we get into what they're into, you're a Christian. Why would you feel motivated to not accept that man is his own savior? I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in as to why you, not the cult, not the clan, not your guru, why you would, you know, have a problem with that. What's in your psychology that has made you in the 20 years of your life, or the 25 years of life, or the 40 years of your life, not have enough brain cells to realize, my God, that's the bottom line. Because in my opinion, if you don't accept that, you are an unsane person. You're not insane, you're unsane. You're toxic, and you know, you need to be quarantined or something. That's really the long and short of it, in my opinion. Then I want to get the crucifix out. As soon as I hear that somebody is, you know, thinking that another authority, another person has the rights over their mental and emotional and attitudinal and psychic life, I'm worried about that person. Because I know that person has got some very serious psychological and existential problems. Right off the bat. Right off the bat. But then that person is going to be, you know, a herd, part of some herd, or will be a controller of a herd, or will be manipulated by the herd, or whatever you want to call it. But that person is not going to end ever. You're never going to find that person, you know, in doing good in the world, real necessary good at all. It's just a contradiction in terms. It's impossible. They may be sold the illusion or the delusion that they're doing wonderful work because they give to Live Aid or the next stupid charity that pops up out of the woodwork, you know. They were there. Great, you were there, yeah. Well, we had Live Aid, didn't we? When was that? 1982 or something? You know, did the world get any better? No, all that happened is Bono and Geldof got on their best clothes one day and walked off down there to Buckingham Palace, got on their bony knees and said, thank you, Mom, for their little award. Okay, that's what happened. And their kids will go to good schools and they will have, you know, $1 million hotels and they'll have the best time of it because they're sellouts. They're people who sold out or were already working for this cult of Dionysus. People's champions in order to lead you away, just like in the Monty Python Meaning of Life. Follow Andre, the waiter. He's got something to show you, so you go up down some streets,
Over here.
up some alleyways,
Come on.
through a bunch of parks,
Over me, huh?
take you on a 15-minute tour
Nearly there now.
to show you something.
See that?
It leaves you up in an empty field.
Much of a philosophy, I know. Fuck you.
And then gets angry with you.
Fuck off.
You don't think it's very much.
Don't come following me.
Yeah. So keep on following Andre. That's what every guru, every priest, every politician is telling you. It's all tomorrow. Every scientist, you're going to have it tomorrow. You're going to have it tomorrow. You can't have it today. Because we don't live in the now. We live in tomorrow's world. Tomorrow doesn't even their own science proves tomorrow doesn't exist, but they're going to tell you it all exists in tomorrow. So the fundamental line is discover that there's a hidden hand, mind controlling the world, operating to keep you down. Understand that you are a participant in that because you are allowing those hooks into your flesh. I've said it many times, and I said it recently, said it last year, you must distinguish the difference between saying, have I been sold a lie? And the difference between, yeah, but have I bought a lie? Because there's all the difference in the world attitudinally between those two statements. You are being sold a lie. But that's the perfect right of that salesman to sell you a lie. The universal force doesn't care about that. Universal force's judgment, field is not really operating on that frequency at all. The judgment field, the whole spiritual ball of wax begins based on whether or not you bought that lie. That's the clause, that's the nuance, that's the difference. It's a no different a rule than anything that applies when you're shopping downtown. I can't even think of how it would be different. You know, this person prefers Gucci over, you know, Versace. This person likes the Levi's over Wrangler. They have the right to sell you whatever they feel like. They have the right to even believe what they feel like. You know, somebody likes cappuccino, somebody else likes what? Latte, mocha, right? Choice must be there. The decision is yours. But where the real moral component comes in is what you bought and what you put your energy into and what you gave in exchange for what you bought. And if man is not in inner harmony or tuned correctly, he's going to create chaotic noise. If a guitar isn't tuned properly, don't expect it to play well. It's going to be in discord and it will create chaotic sounds. So the bottom line comes in is, but how are you tuned? How are you tuning your inner instrument, your consciousness? As I said, the alternative to that is to not tune it, but then hang out with a whole symphony of likewise untuned people, so you can all believe you're cool. In fact, you can say, no, this is a radical new form of avant-garde music we're playing here. It's real hip, it's real cool. All this chaos. In fact, this chaos is really true. This chaos is the ultimate form of music. But that's just you know, mind controlling yourself into believing that your chaos is order. And unfortunately, there are very toxic people in the world who don't like order. They want chaos because they feel good in that chaos, and you're providing it for them. No human being who is in their center can be hypnotized. That's what needs to be remembered. No human being who is in their center, who is being guided, who is close to their intuition, who's a sharp, critical apparatus, who's got a sharp sense of judgment, can ever be manipulated. Not for any permanent or lasting length of time. You know, they can be diluted temporarily perhaps, but you know, it's like a muscle you have to keep on working on, a muscle you have to keep on sharpening, like anything. And I really believe that a lot of the obstacles and challenges and you know, tragedies that are occurring in the world, that's what this is for. This is the grinder. This is the thing that's sharpening the blades of intelligent people. You know, you have to have friction. I'm sorry, it just happens. You can't sharpen an axe or a beautiful blade without that grinder, without that sharpening apparatus and the friction that's caused in the mechanics of that. So it's the same way with sharpening consciousness. You must have this whetstone of the world in order to sharpen your mind and sharpen your consciousness, so that you come to see, you know, some of the meaning in all of this. And it's ultimately a discovery of your own self. It's not about a discovery of society or other people. All of it is a discovery of who and what you are, ultimately. So we come back to this comment or this quote at the back of Jim Keith's Mass Control. The first sentence was, "Here stands the new man." And this ties into my work on 2012. You know, and looking at just one other theory that might explain, because the generally held consensus is, you know, that 2012 will signal the end of the world. Obviously that's not going to happen, but it's not the end of the world, it's the end of man's world. It's the end of one cycle of experience. This is what I keep emphasizing, you know, it's that it's lunatic to think you can ever negatively affect nature or time or even the planet Earth to that extent. But what you can change is your own lifestyle, the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to politically, economically, religiously, psychologically, you see. From an astrological point of view, and if you tie in astrology with psychology, you get this concept about the death of the ego, that the ego of man's inner light, his inner sun, is finite. It has a finite life cycle, as a matter of fact. This is very much brought out in the Vedas, but it's also brought out in astrology with the 12 houses of the zodiac representing the 12 cycles, the 12 seasons of consciousness. Well, we happen to be in the very last degrees of the last sign of the zodiac, opening a whole, you know, subject connecting to the mortality, fatality of the ego itself. And that could this cycle be either the beginning or the ending cycle of this one phase of ego life. Doesn't mean that another type of ego life won't manifest tomorrow, all the gods are born out of the waters again, you know, return to chaos, then arises a newborn type of consciousness. But the fact of the matter is that predictions of tomorrow don't interest me. What interests me is what's happening now. What is the climate that's happening now? But even leaving that aside, whether or not the ego is going to die, or whether or not there is this life cycle in consciousness, which I personally do believe, the whole new man concept, or also what some scholars have called the post-human world, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what also we need to be paying attention to, that are we hurtling towards a time of apocalypse because the controllers or the people who think of us as their creations are actually going to move in themselves to another phase of life, another cycle of life. One that involves, you know, the organic computer, or a more mechanical type of mind. The mind is quite capable of operating mechanically. The brain, as I said, after all, is programmed by the outside world. It's nothing more than a glorified computer. But so could the end of history, or the end of man's history, around about 2012 be this? The opening or the initiation? And never forgetting also that there is this other unseen hand that knows absolutely what consciousness is, who are experts in that fact. You're walking around couldn't care less. You're waiting for the next movie to come out, and the next fashion and all that, what Hollywood's going to do next. But there's people there who have a thorough understanding of human consciousness, human psyche, human libido, and they're working on it 24/7 to feather their own nests, and also to keep man in servitude, man whom they think is their creation. You know, they think of man as just being one of their own, you know, like somebody treats a pet. If you actually watch how people mostly treat their pets, you know, when you really watch it, you'll find that the pet is a slave. Well, we have people ruling this society who think of human beings as pets and slaves. Yeah, they provide you with some food and they take you for a walk now and again, you know, but they basically you are a pet, and you'll be told where to sit and where to go and what to do. That should be obvious to people by now. But these individuals don't really have any fear of us. Well, they do have fear of us to the extent that they know if we were awakened what we could do.
I'm deeply troubled that a very vague, emotionally stated, semi-theologically defined diagnosis of the central global menace is obscuring our national ability to comprehend the historically unprecedented challenge which is being posed in our time by a massive global political awakening, and thus is obstructing our ability to deal effectively with the global political turmoil that this awakening is generating.
So their motive of why they would want to dumb down people is also highly practical. Remember, these people are very, very practical. They may be evil, but they're also very practical. They know that you don't want a massive, intelligent, free-thinking, self-aware, proactive, deeply concerned, spiritually empowered people. That's the worst threat that they can imagine. So it's very practical for them to keep people, you know, what do they call it? One leash for one neck. Everybody in a complete sense of consent, with the illusion that they're independent. It doesn't work without that.
It looks like a unanimous majority. Exactly, that's what's worrying me. Very bad for morale. Some of these good people don't seem to appreciate the value of free elections. They think it's a game.
Everyone votes for a dictator.
Not at all. Just that their resistance is low. Frankly, my dear fellow, you are just the sort of candidate we need.
There's recently a lack of opposition in the matter of free elections. This is not good for our community and reflects an acceptance of things as they are. We know what we must do. what must we do? We are, however, fortunate in having with us a recent recruit whose outlook is particularly militant and individualistic. Let us hope that he will not deny his duty to the community by refusing to take up the challenge. Good people, it is my pleasure to present to you the one and only number 6.
I am not a number. I am a person. In some place, at some time, all of you held positions of a secret nature and had knowledge that was invaluable to an enemy. Like me, you are here to have that knowledge protected or extracted.
That's the stuff to give them.
Unlike me, many of you have accepted the situation of your imprisonment and will die here like rotten cabbages.
Keep going, they'll love it.
The rest of you have gone over to the side of our keepers. Which is which? How many of each? Who's standing beside you now? I intend to discover who are the prisoners and who the warders. I shall be running for office in this election.
Good people, let us applaud a citizen of character. May the better man win, and a big hand for number 6. Good seeing you.
You must absolutely have the illusion of independence and self-determination. We have a problem then. We have a problem that to really, really be independent, to really be an individual, which in psychological terms is called individuation, that's difficult for most people. It's kind of tough. Requires work. Requires, to think and act in moral ways, and that's just too much trouble. I wish there was a halfway, stage. So the media goes, well, there is. We'll sell you the fashion of independence. You can buy into this. You can be a goth, a punk, you can be straight, you can be gay, you can be macho. We'll sell you all sorts of images to decorate your inauthentic life. And that will pacify you because there is a voice that's kind of screaming inside of you that you're not living an authentic life. We know that. We know that's a tough voice to live with. But you also can't really do anything about it because, you're lazy and you're weak. And you realize what you would have to sacrifice or lose if you really took the true moral way. The way of selfhood and the way of finding out who and what you are. We know that's difficult for you. So what we'll do is we'll manifest a bunch of simulacras. We have a whole industry creating false personas. But if you buy into that, and it's very easy to do that, it's just a matter of going down to the hairdresser and coloring your hair pink and wearing a couple of earrings and getting a few tattoos and, having a big t-shirt with anarchy written on it. But you're the last person who even understands what true freedom and anarchy is. Well, don't worry about that. Well, the world is full of those kinds of people, isn't it? But do you see it as being any more free? If that was ever going to solve the world's problems, what happened in the 1960s when everybody was free, quote unquote? Where's the love now? Did it stop wars? Did it stop evil men ruling the world? Did it stop genocide? Did it stop the mutilation of animals and abattoirs? Tell me what one thing that the hippie movement or the punk movement of the 1970s achieved. Well, I'll tell you what they achieved. The leaders of the punk movement are living like pashas and maharajas in $1 million houses over there in Bel Air and also in Los Angeles. Billy Idol has a fleet of Harley Davidsons. That's what happened. That's what happened. But they're wearing a hammer and sickle. We're for the people, peace and love, CND, all that shit, utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Maybe the man from within who's completely incognito, who's working within the system, suit and tie, you'd pass them by on the street. Maybe those people will do more damage to the evil status quo than all those hordes screaming for reform, Because it's not just a mass of people label reading, running away into these inauthentic models. It's a small group of educated people, dedicated, passionate, absolutely zero tolerance for the lie, who are from all walks of life, who have spiritually, most importantly, that they are spiritually adept. that they understand what knowledge is. They have reverence for knowledge. They're not just trying to gain knowledge. Any idiot can do that. Gaining knowledge, well, God, the schools are full of it. No. It's a matter of loving knowledge. That's a big difference. Loving knowledge, understanding what knowledge is a whole different thing than gaining knowledge. So there's these fine lines in all of this, very fine lines. And if the knowledge has to be empowering and changing you first, how can you do anything to change another world? Or maybe you don't even have the right. Maybe we're on the complete wrong subject matter altogether. How does anyone even think that they have a right to involve themselves in the life or the lifestyle of anyone else? If you really think about that, you'll find it's pretty preposterous. But at the same time, you do have the right to fix your own life. That, at least, we know is an absolute. You have the absolute right to work on your life. You have the right to make any of the choices that you want to make. So then my work sort of really focuses on that and doesn't stray from that. If it is true that the Illuminati, the child molesting priests, the Templars, and all of these people, what would we think if it is proven or found out that each and every one of these people has the perfect right to do what they are doing? And that you, in fact, have really no right to tell them or anyone else what to do? What happens if that turns out to be the spiritual law? And that the only thing that you have the right to do is to change your own life, regardless of what anybody else is doing? Well, then we have a problem, because the whole world is running around doing exactly the opposite. Everyone's running around fixing all of these other people and waving placards and getting reforms and getting to change this and do that, or we'll lock you up. And society will go through these cycles in which you have a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, a little bit of dark, a little bit of light. And yet the real work is about you taking care of your own house, your own garden. And if everybody did that, unseen forces would come to aid. Man would, like Vernon Howard said, we can accept that God can become man to save man, but we can't accept that man can become God to save himself. It's one of the most powerful statements I've ever heard. And so what is that dependency in human beings that makes them refute that? We know that everyone listening to the sound of Disney World, fake Hollywood creation of their sensational life. The one-sided, the one-seasoned world person who's quite happy with that, all the things that society provides, and who's lost themselves in society and their job and their career and their sport, and all of that. Not that these things are individually wrong, but it's about how people have got immersed in all of this. So that person who's now completely one-dimensional, who's troubled by anything that, disturbs their little view of reality, this little homogenous world of franchised, corporatized, televised, media-sized, pre-digested rubbish that is being put out there, created ad infinitum. What happens, because the emotions don't go away. This is what Freud and all have so beautifully proved. You can repress them, because this is a faculty of consciousness. It was actually a needed faculty, but we overdo it. You can repress your emotions. You can pretend they don't exist. You can forget, and then forget that you forgot, which is what repression is. However, the psychologists have always reminded you that only works up to a point. The unconscious is not a endless dumpster in which you can perpetually dump all your psychic content, because life will bring up more challenges that again bring out those repressions. I believe that a lot of the chaos you're seeing now and the wars and the state of America is in specifically is a result of psychic repression. But I've explained that elsewhere. What I'm looking at right now is, could it be that man becomes so threatened, so destabilized by his own emotions, such an incredibly disassociated person, that first they run to drugs, as the culture is doing now. People run to medication, people run to sugar, to gossip, to the match, the game, whatever, all the different ways that people run to escape looking at themselves. I don't see any difference in that. And if you predict out in the future, if you sort of look with prescience and think, well, man isn't changing that status quo, he's not getting any wiser, he's certainly not turning to alleviate the problem in a good way. Well, my God, then, that's pretty frightening. Is that what it means by the end of the world, the end of history? That all the idioms that have been built by our wise forefathers. We sell it up the river. When I look around at human beings, I can definitely see that coming. You only have to speak a few lines of wisdom on any mainstream chat show and everyone falls into dead silence like you're a dinosaur. You can be on the Bill Maher show, you can be on Oprah Winfrey, and you just happen to drop one line of anything that sounds like it means something, and everyone freezes like they've been tasered. There's the obligatory silence, change of subject, or you're a nut. Suspicion. People are suspicious of the wise. I'll tell you why they're suspicious of that. Because they have now removed themselves in their consciousness so far from their own authentic voice, from their own imagination body, from their own centers of intelligence. What is it? You have intellect, but you don't have intelligence? People can be intellectual, but not necessarily intelligent. It's very true. It's very accurate. But if you have removed yourself and you become so dependent on the teachers and the priest and the expert, that you've so divorced yourself from your own voice. I don't see. People have, in my eyes, they've already done that. When you go to school and, there's no difference in the world to me. Then the type of acceptance of external authority that is already going on right now in the world and what might be coming tomorrow of a more severe nature. Because the most frightening machine of all is a man that has lost his humanity, lost his virtue. What you see in most people today is not virtue. What you see today is the performance of deeds, sort of by rote, like you've been trained. You take even a fantastic stallion, a wild stallion, but you train it and you whip it every hour of every day, you're going to have that stallion do the most idiotic things. They can make the elephant, the greatest of all creatures on the earth, jump through hoops and do the most ludicrous things. Killer whales, can you believe it? Have been trained to, pounce about in a swimming pool. Don't tell me then that the human being is not going to be able to, told to stand on his head. He's absolutely quite capable. He does it every day. He's in absolute escapism from the real. And so that person can become so far removed, so psychically, he can become an inhabitant psychically of the periphery of being. If you want to use some philosophical jargon, he can become an inhabitant, of the periphery of his own being. He can live on the surface of himself. Hell, you only have to listen to most people's voices to know they're living on the surface of themselves, that they're not even connected to their deeper emotions. Some people are experts in the way people walk, their stance, their posture, sound of voice, choices that they've made, the relationships that they're in. There's ways to tell. There's ways to tell. And people are sitting around going, well, I don't know what that means. You have to tell me what it means. You got to show, have you got a religion I can join, or, have you got a book I can read, or, where's the system? I'd love to do that. I'd love to find out all about myself. Tell me how. Tell you how. What planet are we on here? The meaning is that you discover it yourself. This is an absolute journey only you can go on. So man was created once, or at least his biology was very messed with, and he arose in recent times. Somewhere between 50,000 years ago and 13,000 years ago, something incredible happened that then caused, historical trauma. And that trauma can be traced back about 10,000 years ago when the first records of man violence on man, man's violence on nature, the disconnect started to happen. And this bipolar type of thing happened. And one of the greatest symptoms of the fact that man is very removed from his center is that not only is he not looking at the dark side of himself, not only is he misunderstanding what it means when traumas happen and tragedy happens, complete misunderstanding of that, he's also misunderstanding those children of rebellion or children of the Holy Spirit who are amongst him now that are showing a new way. To make it more obvious or clear, all those so-called ADD children, right, attention deficit disorder nonsense, right? Oh yes, you're oppositional. I think back to the prisoner, Patrick McGowan, unmutual. So we better deal with you. You're unmutual. You don't want to be unmutual. In fact, in that particular episode, it's strikingly brilliant how he shows the clamor of voices. Number 6, the prisoner, is introduced to all the different factions. Remember we were talking about all the different points of view in the factions? He meets all of these people. He meets a poet, a little left-winger, an extremist. He meets all of these little people who are all thinking he is their worst enemy. He hasn't opened his mouth, he hasn't said a thing, but he doesn't fit in with any of the groups because he won't join. So each group has one thing in common: they hate him. But getting back to our point, these children that are sitting there with so-called a defective oppositional disorder, they're broken, they're broken, society's not broken. Well, as a matter of fact, what happens if we turn that around and say that these are children of the Aquarian age who find your jive so utterly, incomprehensibly boring that they cannot pay attention because it is about the most anti-spiritual, soulless junk that any human being would ever want to be exposed to. But you don't see that, so they're broken, they're dysfunctional, they're, need treatment. This is a symptom. These are the teachers of tomorrow. These are the Aquarian children. These are the meta children. What's often been called indigo children, whatever that means, but the exceptional children, the exceptional teens who are so much more mature, than their parents and other people. They've already checked out of that lie. Granted, they may not know where exactly to be going, but they've reached 50% of the job. They realize that this is a joke. And in fact, it's so much of a joke that I'll take anything other than what you're selling me. Now, the downside of that is, you see, you've also got the Dark Brothers waiting to drag them into all that other perversion and perversity, you see, which is the danger, of course. Because now that they're leaving, it's like lemmings going over the cliff. If you don't know where you're going, you have the danger to be picked up by the dark side, recruited, so to speak. And these cults and orders have seeded the popular culture movement with their own agents that look very alluring and who sell you all of this stuff, so that children are waylaid. This is an old story going back to the earliest fairy tales and folk tales, you see, of the seduction of the children, all back to Hansel and Gretel and way back before that. Or the Pied Piper of Hamelin concept. How real is that story, So the dysfunction is in society not being able to catch up with the new kind of whole brain, holarchic thinking, which is extremely needed, not to stop left brain thinking, but to include it, to have a whole symbolic literacy thing going, to learn in much more egalitarian ways, to include the person as opposed to the brain in teachings and in schooling. So man now finds himself at a point where he has a tremendous choice. New man sounds lovely when you say the word. Well, utopian sounds wonderful when you say the word. But if that is a utopia born out of the ashes of the world that was created by our ancestors, I don't want to know about it. If the new man is spiritually stark, born out of the ashes of the world that was created by our ancestors, I don't want to know about it. If the new man is spiritually stark naked, I don't want to know about him. Vico understood it. Edward Gibbon understood it. Plato understood it. That civilizations, they rise and they fall. We can say that we are in a necrotic cycle. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nature has its cycles, like the winter cycle, and all the way up the fractal you have the same concept of this anaerobic and catabolic cycles, the construction and the deconstructive. All that needs to happen is an attitudinal change today, which people get with this deconstructive model. And allow your children to explore it and understand it. Because they are picking up on it like antenna more than the average person who's in lockdown, see, in this mediocrity of their life. Change is going to happen whether you like it or not. One has to realize that if you go with the deconstructive cycle, then out of that comes the most, finest things. When you really realize its beauty, when you see its beauty for what it is, then you realize it's nothing to be fearful about at all. All that it's doing is it's ending your lie. It's ending your illusion. It's taking away from you that which you don't need. So let it go, attach to nothing and let it go. But then you're going to have the conservative mindset on the other side who can't do that. And so those are the people who are in trouble. Those are the people who are in trouble. And my message to the children of truth, the servants of truth, the ones who are getting a handle on this, can work this into their lives, please, please, please do not for 1 second imagine that it's your job to become the scaffolding for those who are falling. You can interpret this in whatever way you feel like. But you question whether or not it is your job to be reinforcing, propping up, assisting, helping, caring for, or whatever term you want to use, those people who are just, let's say, are not going to continue, and who you know, it's okay that they're not going to continue. You ask yourself that question because you're going to need to know the answer, because it's going to happen. This is a drama in which the protagonist and antagonist, there's a relationship. So the individual is going to have to look into this whole question of dependency. Who are you dependent on? Who are you making dependent on you? Who's asking you to become dependent on them? Who lacks the independence? And what happens if you pull away your energy from those people? You know, if they fall, can you let them fall? Or are you going to spend your life, you see, you know, propping up other people who haven't not got their own stability? You know, is that divinely correct to do that? Is it really in the intention of the true spirit to do that? Maybe it's more spiritual to let people like that fall, because then at least it's a natural thing. Out of that fall, they may grow. They may end up, you know, really passing the tests. Whereas if you're constantly propping them up, you may be violating fate. You may be going against the natural flow of things. But I really encourage people also to not be too speculative about, you know, oh yeah, what's going to happen in the age of Aquarius, you know? Well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You're not going to be around anyway to work it out. So worry about right now the world and the life that you're in, and avoid all these other escapes of what might be tomorrow, and exactly what the, you know, clothes they'll be wearing in the Aquarian age, and what the hairstyles will be like, and, you know, will God really come down to earth in a big chariot, and all of this stuff that preoccupies so many people, you know. That's all pipe dreaming. Anything could happen, you know. Let your imagination roam free, but really bend your practical interests in what is happening now. You're living in an age in which you're meant to be an observer of it. You're meant to be like a sort of a super journalist. It's like that movie, you know, The Day the Earth Stood Still, where the guy comes down, you know. Each individual living today can adopt that kind of understanding. You're here witnessing something incredible. And you should laugh, and you should cry, and you should weep, and you should mourn, and you should be exalted. You should see all of it. But also keep a certain healthy sense of, you know, detachment from it all. Never forgetting that, you know, you have your particular priority and your sovereignty. And then there's the actions of other people in the world. They're two separate things. Because too many people, I think, who want to end government control, set up another kind of control of their own. This is another, you know, problem that has so beset previous reformers, in which everyone thinks, you know, some person thinks they got all the answer, so they take down one tyrant only to become the next one. And that's why I'm so skeptical and really don't pay a slightest interest to what politics is doing, you know, in the political milieu. Because yeah, you could throw around a lot of brilliant ideas stolen from other philosophers and psychologists and great men, but when you actually try to apply it politically, what you often get is another form of tyranny. I mean, if you wrote down on a piece of paper all the pros of the democratic system, it would look wonderful. You know, if you wrote them down, it would just seem, oh, we have to have this. Yeah, well, we do have it, and it's not that great. So there's a difference between the ideology or the philosophy of a particular system and the actual practicality of it. You know, socialism promised so much to foreign immigrants, you know, did it really work? Are those immigrants really assisted? Is any of the people involved in all of that assisted? No. The World Bank promises to take your debt and just help you have a wonderful, thriving civilization in the nation. Has that happened? No. They can't even take care of the Western civilization. It's crumbling at the seams. They can't even fix that. Because then consciousness has been left at the door, and the fundamentals of man being introduced to what he is and turned into his inner republic have been completely forgotten. Man is a genius of an architect when it comes to the outer world. He's created incredible things. Computers, you know, jet planes, and all sorts of marvelous stuff. But the sad thing about it is, and I believe it's also due to manipulation, age-old manipulation, is that he has sort of overlooked and escaped from and denied his inner temple. And so this is where the danger arises, where it becomes inevitable at some point in life you will have occult knowledge, sacred knowledge, precious knowledge falling into the hands of wrong people. When you look at any advertisement, when you look at any graphic, you're seeing art that is brilliant, brilliant art from people of, the level of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Very, very skilled artists. But what are they doing? They're selling you some toothpaste or some stupid car. Think of what, and Peter Jackson has proved that, as many others have. What would happen if those people had turned their talents to the uplift of mankind and to the education of mankind? And incredible stuff. Instead of everyone buying the same ugly looking car, what would it be if you had companies that said, hey, come and design your own? We're a company that builds cars, but we build them in any design you feel like. So you come in, you learn about it, and you submit your designs, and we will build your car. You pay for it just like you pay for a regular, but it's your car. You can even have your name on it. No more personalized number plates. You can have a personalized car. How about that? Do you know how that would turn people on? You know how kids would just love that? So for every little thing we have in our world, there's an alternative way of doing it. There's an alternative setup. And you see this now a little bit with the MySpace, YouTube, Google generation. You see that innovation cropping up a little bit, where people doing different things musically and different things in video. And that's really healthy to see that. Because Aquarius, the Aquarian energy, the age of Aquarius, the scorpionic, rebellious energy, does operate that way. It operates on a grassroots level. The solutions will be of a grassroots nature. Corporate America just doesn't have it, This is not stuff that's going to come down from the penthouse at all. It's not going to be something that's organized. Now, people need to really focus on the fact that it's a study. You're living in a time in which you should never feel emotionally down about the things that are happening. You should realize that you are part of a new paradigm. Because the battles of old were always fought with weapons, and that's useless. The new battles of the world need to be fought with strategy and intelligence.
One thing is sure, a great change of our psychological attitude is imminent. That is certain.
Why?
Because we need more. We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger. And we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.
So, man is the origin and source of all coming evil. It's a provocative statement, all right. By the same token, though, man could also be the source of all coming good. I guess our future is what we make it. It all comes down to a matter of choice. And maybe there's nothing we can do about good and evil. Maybe they're absolutes. In the end, it all comes absolutes. In the end, it all comes down to our attitudes towards these realities of good and evil, freedom and enslavement. History has shown us that even when men are forcibly chained and incarcerated, they can still be free inwardly, in their minds and in their hearts. Whatever the future brings, this is the important thing to remember.
So my part of this first DVD was to make the graphics and the animations, also the music, to make and to add the music, and to cut or edit the film. And then of course to weave everything together in one coherent movie, so you can sit down and enjoy the film. And the style of the animation was consciously chosen. We wanted to have something that really replicated an effect of something that's very dreamy or very kind of free-flowing in a way. And this is more of this is so much more than just presentation of information. We wanted to have a kind of an artistic feel to the entire film as well. A little bit more like a music video, actually, in one way. Maybe not a pop music video, but something that you can potentially sit down and watch without the dialogue. So you should be able to enjoy it just for the graphics, for the imagery, for the animation, and for the music as one. But then when you combine all of these things, of course, all these three elements, you come up with a very interesting and very kind of powerful way of communicating a message, which is more beyond just structured information per se. It speaks more to the right brain, and it can help to convey messages on multiple levels as well, because the same idea applies with movies like Koyaanisqatsi, for instance, where they actually have the entire movie without any spoken words, but you still can see a very powerful message in there being conveyed. So that's what we really wanted to go for here, follow along in the dialogue that Majkl has in a very free-flowing way, and that's also why you see the transitions are very kind of translucent, they're more interwoven. Not in all cases, but in most cases it's not rough cuts like that. It's to present that idea of just going with the flow in a way. And this is also a film I think that where you really can sit down and watch any chapter of it, and you don't have to see the previous one or the chapter before in order to follow along in the story as it goes along. Then we have this area with excerpts from other movies. We have clips from TV series and other documentaries, of course, too. And this is a very good way for us to use to, for one, kind of go away a little bit from the main storyline, and to go off on a tangent for a little while and then come back to the main story. But that is also there for the reason or for the purpose to convey a message, obviously, a conscious message to underline something that is being said in the dialogue, or to emphasize it, or to show something similar that people might be able to relate to in another way. So you can use a clip as almost like a symbol or something that represents something powerfully. So that's why we wanted to have a few clips in there as well, and excerpts to go off on tangents and to emphasize points even more. And it's also that idea that you, in order to create an image of the world, basically, that we're all trying to do, trying to understand reality, you need rather to dip into your own pool of the films that you've seen or the documentaries that you've seen, and that's what kind of helps you to create a worldview, basically. And then we have this other area with the music that was really interesting for me to do music to a 2-hour-long documentary. I haven't done music for such a long project before. And the classical things can be said about the music, of course. You need a little bit more upbeat music tunes, and then you need a bit more atmospheric or melancholic tunes at times. And that's the same thing message there. It needs to be emphasizing the dialogue, of course, go along with that. Sometimes you need a bit more pulse in it and a little bit more upbeat to take you on that little bit of roller coaster journey. And sometimes you need just more atmospheric sounds rather than music with melodies and stuff in there. And one thing that can be said about the music, of course, is that we haven't chosen any other person's music and just bunged it in there. We have actually made the music ourselves, and I think that that's another powerful way of doing it, where you can communicate something with the music as well. So overall, what can be said about the project is that it's very rich, both in graphics but also in music, and the dialogue. To add that up or to to underline the music, and the graphics should underline the dialogue. And in some cases, the graphics or the animation might cut off to a little bit of different area, and maybe not just be contextual to the dialogue that is that Majkl is speaking, but it also goes off on a tangent and shows something else, so you can kind of communicate on multiple levels at the same time. So that's really interesting. And then, of course, the thing about that it's also an art form. Film should be can be an artistic expression as well, not only to, as I said before, just convey information per se, but this is a kind of blending of all different genres. You can have it more artistic, more like an artwork really than just information. But again, when you blend all the three different things that you have there, and you bring in sound effects and music and graphics and then the dialogue, you end up with an interesting mix. Because in many cases, not all documentaries, but many documentaries are kind of, not that they're heavy, but they can be a bit cold. It's not a storytelling, or they're not warm or have a kind of an artistic expression to it, because they're just about the information per se. But since we don't have any obligations to anyone else, we're independent, and we can do whatever we want to do with this. We can basically explore all the different arenas, and this was one way of doing it, and a very interesting way of doing it. And it helps to emphasize the point again that you can just put this on at any place and enjoy it for what it is, either for the information, because it's interesting and it's important information and it's empowering, but at the same time you can enjoy it as a animated, almost like a music video type thing. And another thing that is very powerful, of course, is to use this technique of communicating on multiple levels, if you will, of using graphics and imagery and even speaking on a symbolic level. It's not so much maybe that you're hiding things subtextually or anything like that, and that doesn't really occur in this movie. It's more like it's very rich in the imagery, so you can watch it several times over, and you're always going to discover something new. It's just not one image that is up there that's contextual, but it's sometimes multiple frames, sometimes it's images interwoven and whatnot. But also this idea of communicating on many different levels, that's something that the big guys use at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. These boys who know how to speak to both of the brain, the hemispheres of the brain, and communicate to you on multiple levels. And it's not really their arena, so to speak. Anyone can use these tools in order to empower people instead of bringing negative messages to people. So that's one area that is very interesting to explore and can really help to emphasize the points they want to get across, but use it for a positive purpose instead of using it in a subversive manner, or try to bring in a negative or an occult or hidden message in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for people to realize that what we're creating is not something that's meant to make you okay with the status quo. You know, it's not designed to make you roll over and go to sleep and say, well, okay, you know, make me feel good, you know, ruffle my feathers, you know, make me feel fuzzy and warm about what's going on. It's important to laugh. We get a lot of criticism sometimes. They go, oh, you guys are so serious, you know, you take everything so seriously, everything's so pessimistic. First of all, it's not true. And I accept and know the importance of laughter and humor, you know, and to take everything, to take certain things seriously and other things not so seriously. But at the same time, when you're presenting this kind of information, when you're like a detective on the trail of a criminal, you know, everything's not okay. It's not fun to see mutilated bodies, you know, murdered people, you know, injustices. So when we're dealing with a specific area, you know, I'm sorry, you know, you have to call spade a spade. You know, my work is very much about that. I'm not interested in whether people are going to like it or not. I don't want people to roll over and go to sleep, which is the reaction when any kind of light is turned on somebody. You have that reaction where they're going to either strike out at the person holding the light, or they're going to, you know, cover themselves over with the sheets, crawl under the blankets, try to, you know, hide away from that. And it's ultimately, I don't want people to feel okay with injustice. I don't want people to just, which is what has happened. And this is what Big Brother kind of wants us to do, is by constantly insinuating this trauma on the television, they're dumbing us down to the point where we don't even, notice it anymore. And people have even said that certain centers of the brain, pleasure centers of the brain, are now being stimulated when people are seeing, acts of horror and terror. And you see this, it's ubiquitous. The line between fiction, fictional murder, fictional crime, is blurred with what is real. I'm okay with all forms of fiction. I think if crime or violence is shown in fiction, I'm kind of okay with that. From some of the greatest shows, greatest war pictures, or, there's all different kinds of violence. There's psychic violence, there's emotional violence, so there's all sorts of violence. But what is happening with Big Brother is that they're trying to present a lot of fictional violence to us so that we become acclimatized to it, or the more, sociological term is acculturated to it, so that we don't really think of the stuff that's happening in the physical world as being that reprehensible. This is a big danger. So what also we got to deal with is, in our work, we are not interested in presenting this information so that it makes you feel okay with the injustice. We want you to be mad as hell. I do. My big thing is to be mad as hell. Not with the anger that I refer to as the red flame of anger, which is, when your silly little ego needs are not being met and you strike out like an infant. I'm talking about the blue flame of anger, which is a very different phenomenon, and it's rooted in spirituality. It's rooted in a critical understanding of the world. The very people who keep talking to you about being pessimistic and being too critical are themselves cynical. This is what we find. You find it from the people who email us, the people who get in touch. And so they're unhappy that you're critiquing, but then you find out that these people have a very cynical, whatever attitude towards reality. They are the people who really are shaken up by you being an investigator and bringing up things, like child abuse or mind control, or the machinations of secret societies and all of the above. They are actually threatened by this because they're just getting a handle on reality. And the last thing they want is for you to come and shake up their reality. But my work always insists that you don't see reality, you only have an idea of reality. And if I'm shaking up your idea of reality, you got to believe I'm okay with that, because that's what needs to happen. You have to have your own inner republic, shaken up at certain times. I've often said in my other writings, 9/11 may have shaken people up, but it did wake people up. There's a difference. And with the Alex Joneses and the people who've covered these 9/11 atrocities, and some of them have done excellent jobs, they may be able to shake the American people up or the world's people up, but see, as people are going to discover later on, once you've shaken somebody up out of their sleep, they're going to very quickly say to you, where do I go now? Do I go back into another slave pen of, say, religion or Christianity or whatever? So my work, the work we've been doing on this DVD is very much to say, okay, we're hoping that you're shaken up, and we'll even, assist in that process of shaking the hell out of you, to make you mad as hell, to say, okay, tell me what's going on, But we're going to offer even more than that. The idea is that hopefully we can even, point in another direction and offer some tools for the waking up process as well as the shaking up process. Yeah, I hope that the people who are watching this, are from both categories. There are people who are seasoned. They know a bit about this. They've done some homework. They've done some research. But I'm more, in my work for the last lot of years, especially as I've gotten more well-known or whatever you want to call it, from the emails and communiques I've got, 90% of them are from people who have been into the thing a couple of weeks, into this research, into this so-called alternative view. And yeah, they're novices. They're not, fully conversant with all the stuff that we are. But there's a tremendous passion and a tremendous interest and a great desire. In fact, that's the reason why they're making communication. They're getting online and asking incredible questions. And so over a couple of years, it didn't occur to me in the beginning, but in the last couple of years, I've really noticed that, this is the group that we need to be aware of. Not so much the seasoned, what I would call the choir. Because you see, the choir tends to also become quite arrogant. I sense this in the communiques, I sense this in emails, I sense this in the feedback. That, and again, as I said, I didn't see it originally. It's taken a bit of time. But with people who think they know about this, or they've bought a few books, or they've checked out a few, things online or whatever, or there tends to be, and this is probably the case with all knowledge, even academic knowledge, there tends to be a bit of arrogance, a bit of know-it-all, a bit of, butting heads, and a lot of meaningless, sort of repartee over minutiae. And what's lacking there is the passion. With the newcomers, and remember, when I say newcomer, I don't mean just the newcomers of this month, this year. In the countdown to 2012 and beyond, you're going to have every year, possibly hundreds of thousands of people who are absolutely new to this. So my focus has now shifted somewhat from the choir and preaching to them who think they know it all, and trying to present information, which I think we've done really successfully in this series, to present, and that doesn't mean talk down to anyone, that doesn't mean cut things up too small. What it means is to be very conscious of the fact that you have newcomers in, and they see this welter of information, they see all these scholars, some of them are very different in their approach, they cover different kinds of information. We have to be concerned about them and realize that later on they'll become the choir, but then you have yet more waves and more waves of new people. So the kinds of questions, and as I said, most importantly, the kind of passion that I've sensed from these people is what's motivated me to, to work on the DVD in this way, is to present information, for instance, about Jim Keith, mind control, to show all the levels of it, from the basic street level forms, of how people are controlled, all the way up to the mega level, government and beyond. We understand that there's something psychopathic going on with killers and with rapists and with serial killers and whatnot, and we can accept this when it's on the street level, when some psycho is dragged into court, or some mother who's massacred her children or something like that. Okay, ooh, horror, shock horror, what a creature. But it's very important also to realize that further up the ladder, this same sort of psychopathy exists, and the same thing with mind control. It exists on the individual levels, and we're getting a handle on that. Some of these lone assassins and so on, people tend to believe, okay, something bizarre there. But it's very important to realize that this thing goes all the way up the scale, right to a very, very high level, which is like what we've been talking about in the DVD. I think one of the most important keys, one of the most important themes for people to get who are watching this, even if they don't, follow all the different scholars that we've been presenting, if they don't, carry on researching all of this kind of material, the most important thing for them to realize is that can they begin to at least understand that man has been mind controlled or is mind controlled. What I mean by that is, look at those old pictures from the 1950s, New York streets, gangster movies or whatever, the Alan Ladd movies or Humphrey Bogart movies. Look at the the uniform way everybody's dressed, especially males. I mean, it's cute and everything, right? But the suits, the shoes, the hats, and we look at that and we fail sometimes to see the uniformity of it all. Because we're living in a modern age, sometimes we think everybody's free, everybody's diverse, nothing could be better, we're more independent than we've ever been. But see, my point of view is are we really, or is that just an illusion? What about thinking? Yeah, you may be dressed differently, you may have more fashions out there, you may have the illusion of diversity. But when it comes to really attitudinal, really, especially when it's psychological, this is what the series is going to focus on and looks into with a great detail, is see when it comes to some of the psychological mindsets, psychological urges, psychological drives, such as submission, perhaps, how we relate to Big Daddy, perhaps. Are men and women really that different? Has anything really changed since the Middle Ages? I don't think it has. What has happened is that the inauthentic life has become more decorated. Right? We've got more perks, we've got more fashions, we've got more isms and ologies, and we've got more escapes than ever before. But man psychologically is identical to the man he was maybe even 1,000 years ago in these fundamental attitudes. So then there's advocates of the fact that television programs, is the brain being programmed? And I say absolutely. I'm not against television, by the way, I must say that, because it's not the oracle, it's who's using it and what for. This is a thing I insist over again and again. How much we've learned about the world from television and from movies and from films and documentaries, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the hands that who's using it, who's manipulating those oracles. But you see, I'm very interested in this. It's very important for us to realize that in my work, I don't point fingers. In this, it's very important for us to realize that in my work, I don't point fingers only at some them out there on the other side of the hill, some sort of, white brotherhood, Illuminati, aliens, for instance, this kind of caper, I talk about them, but I'm much more interested in what it is in human beings that allows them to be open to this kind of slavery, for want of a word. Why do people submit to this? What's going on with that? And also then how Big Brother co-opts man's need to lean, right, and to use the handrails. It's twofold, right? The slave, see, the master and the slave has a relationship. This is what is forgotten. Both are dependent on one another. The dependency is caused, or the slave wants to be dependent, because in order to face the anxiety, he'd rather face the anxiety of living under a pretty punitive, tyrannical master than face the anxiety of selfhood and face the anxiety that arises from finding on the true Siddhartha road of light. He's tried it. Most human beings try this. They dabble. It's too awful. Selfhood is a weight. It's a great thing to discover your own, selfhood. So mankind tends to not want to do that. He loses his center. He loses his sovereignty, and he becomes a leaner. He leans. We're all leaning on one another. There's the old handrails thing again. You're using the handrails. Okay, then Big Brother comes in and goes, oh, now that we know that the man is weak, he has no spine, he's leaning, we'll provide more things for him to lean on. And the slave then does not want that pillar of rightness that he's leaning on to ever change. So when you hear people saying, why is it that all these hundreds of years nothing in government ever changes? It's the same old, same old, same old. Even your ordinary, every street-level critic knows this. Man, it's just the same old stuff. We even have footage of different politicians, different prime ministers and presidents repeating the same speech word for word. Right? People are getting a handle on this now. There is an age of awakening, right? We've addressed that. We're talking about that there's more knowledge about how this is all set up, how there is a script being played out. But the most important thing to realize is that if man is a psychological slave, Big Brother makes use of that to continue to pull the rug from under him by the influx of trauma, you see, by constantly threatening his security, so that he leans all the more. So my work is very much to say, how is man lending himself to this kind of tyranny, and what are the levels of control? And can man now, the people who are onto this a little bit, who are waking up to this, let's just examine all the ways in which a man might be remotely controlled. Just in exactly the same way that, a toy truck or a plane, is remotely controlled, a toy plane, or anything that's remotely controlled. Because here's my main point. I do not believe that we're going to see mass incarcerations, guns to the head, jackboots in the face, in that way that has been predicted. That doesn't mean that there is not tyrannical action in the world. I'm not saying that a certain coterie within the hierarchy absolutely would love to do that. But that does not work to suppress the whole of America. And you have to understand the nature of the enemy. The enemy is not interested in doing that. It's had centuries to do that. It's not a fun anymore. The fun is the remote control chess piece. Look, he does exactly what we say he should do. Push that button, watch how his head rolls around and his eyes spin. The perfect slave isn't somebody who's being constantly whipped and beaten into place, because you see there's a great danger that that person will turn on you. They want smiling depressives. They want a tyranny without tears. And they're getting it. It's based on what I just said about this masochism, sadomasochistic, codependent type of thing we have. We see it in ordinary relationships and we accept it. You have high-priced psychologists who will address it. When are we ever going to talk about the same thing happening on the mass level, on a sociological scale, that's ubiquitous throughout the world? So I am looking at a tyranny just in exactly the same way Jim Keith did. Many others have tried to. A wonderful clip from Alex Constantine and others. It is this remote control creature who, as soon as you press on, he's on, and he operates in a preset way. The perfect slave, the perfect robot, the perfect cyber creature. Eventually, he will probably inhabit a cyber purgatory, some sort of state in which you are dealing with a technotronic utopia or dystopia. That's coming. It's coming because I see that man is suppressing what is human within him, his instincts, his intuitions, his spiritual body. We're talking about self-murdered people here. And those self-murdered people who are in total absence of being and in total absence of, selfhood are going to be absolutely screaming for, these technotropic and technological utopias. That's the danger. That's the danger. Well, see, having done a lot of DVDs and coming from different conferences and having watched a lot of different teachers write books and do their DVDs, I've been kind of a little bit unhappy with the way it's done because, remember, we keep on talking about the fact that this subject matter falls under the heading of like an occult, level of research, meaning it's alternative, meaning that people have to adjust their settings. We're not talking from an academic point of view here. It's okay if academics, check out what we're doing, but we are not people who have a university degree nailed on the front of our chest and a target on the back. And that's a definition of an academic. You can't sit around waiting for academics to tell you what's going on in this world in the way that, you find the scintillating work of the, alternative researchers. And if people look at the quality of the literature and the quality of the books that's come out of that world, they would realize there's nothing bogus about it. It's fantastic, given that it's such a small community of people. The Jim Marses and the different authors, fantastic, fantastic work. So the academic has a problem where they're compromised. They're compromised creatures. They have this university degree that they've jumped through the hoops for, but they have a target on their back too, that they're going to be professionally assassinated, they're going to lose position, which has happened. Professor Thompson, I deal with in my work on the Irish origins, people who've lost their jobs because they've spoken out to speak about the facts. But when I've looked at a lot of the other material of this occult field, as good as the information is, as good as the knowledge is and the investigations, something's been lacking in the delivery. And in the alternative field or in the occult field or in the world of spirituality, mysticism, what about the right brain? There's a dearth of communication to the right brain. Then you go to the mainstream, the big blockbuster Miramax super movies, right? Look how much right brain communication they're doing. I don't know if people have noticed this, but it's unbelievable. It's so good. And this, of course, can be found even in certain lower-level, graphic escapades like television commercials and, all that kind of thing. If you look at it from an artistic point of view, it's absolutely amazing what they're doing. I mean, Leonardo would be proud kind of thing, not of the content, but the stylistics. So in all my work, I've tried in a humble way and then in a much more advanced way with, architects of control, is to start to also, instead of talking about it, start opening up a channel of communication to the right brain. And that can only be done through colors, music, rhythm, vibration, to a certain extent, numbers, numerology. So that the left brain, because I believe that our left brain circuitry is already bombarded, man. How many emails do I get going, man, this is so above my head. It's taking time to digest. I don't know where to begin, this kind of thing, What I read in that is actually not that these people are stupid or, they're really having the problems they think they're having. It's because we're maybe making a mistake. So let's take a page out of the people who are putting up this sort of, who are working with all the cinematics and maybe have very anti-human messages. What? That symbolism doesn't belong to them. They've co-opted it from the great surrealists and the great artists, the great humanitarians of the world. Albrecht Dürers, the Salvador Dali's. When you look at certain famous movies, even Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, or Dances with Wolves, or The Truman Show, you see, or The Da Vinci Code, or Matrix. When I'm looking at those movies, I'm going, oh, De Chirico, oh, Dali, oh, Magritte, even, hey, Vermeer, Rembrandt, you know what I mean? An artist going, I see where they got that, oh, I see where they got that, oh, look at that. If you even look at the stylistics, the beauty of some of these incredible movies like The Black Robe, and just so many others I could mention, the absolute exquisiteness of the way that they're made. Paris, Texas jumps to mind and so on. You'll see that these people are highly versed in art, particularly medieval art. art that spoke to the soul of man, that dealt in the phi ratio, that dealt in the golden section, that dealt in the Vesica Pisces. This is all happening in the world of the media. Basically what I'm saying is graphics, imagery, or today more animation. Animation, animate, right? The word anima is the soul, is the spirit. So I am more animation. Animation, animate, right? The word anima is the soul, is the spirit. So I am very much a person who's, in fact, my entire introduction to everything that I'm doing right now was actually through symbolism and through art. In the earliest possible days, there's many threads that lead you to a certain thing, but art and art history was a big part of it. So I've always tried to see this information in a visual style. And so your work with the DVD, and when I saw the work that you had done before we had met, I was going, oh, this guy's got it. He's on to what we're talking about here. He's got the words, and he's got the information, he's got the data, but he is presenting it in a graphic way with animation, and he's framing it. And this speaks to me loudly because there's a whole part of our mind, you see, that can dig what this is all about. And also I want this to be the way of the future because I'm interested in other people who've got these technical skills. I want other kids and other people who've got animations. I'm bumping into them all the time since we've done the DVD going, hey, we love that. And I'm an animator. Great. We got to use these tools that are now being provided for us to, come to this information in a right brain way as well as a left brain way. I mean, there's so much you could say on this, but it's absolutely fundamental, and that's why I believe in this particular documentary film style, because bringing the imagery and the numerology and the rhythms and the music, to bear is the spiritual way of delivering this. Otherwise, it's a different animal when you're just dealing with the words and the information. It's not as good, it's not as hot, in my opinion. We see, again, the trouble is that when you're making anything that's in the media, like a DVD or a film, so much of that is packaged under the heading of entertainment. And we have a Google, MySpace, sort of YouTube generation now, in which people just surf all sorts of material out there. And that's great, I'm all for it. But there is a bit of a danger that people start thinking that, entertain me. Give me more facts. My work is not about continually entertaining you. It's about presenting teachers to you, great thinkers, people who sacrificed, people who lost, people who were jailed, thinkers, teachers of the past, so that you get up and you go and research those people on the internet, and in books form. You check out these incredible souls of light. These are the shining ones who cared about you and your spiritual development, even when you didn't know anything about it. We're novices. We stand on the shoulders of giants. But, so even though, we want to, I'm not ruling out entertainment, but this is about facts. This is about information. This is about seeing the world in a new way. And it's very important that you're not just, going to the movies, where's my popcorn?